SOE, Secret Operations That Saved the World. World War II, apart from its grand battles, was also a war of invisible agents who worked in the shadows to influence the course of history. One of the most important and secretive operations of this war was the SOE, or Special Operations Executive, which played a key role in the fight against Nazism and fascism. SOE was founded in the United Kingdom in 1940 when the threat of Nazi occupation of Europe became a reality. Its purpose was to organize sabotage operations, support resistance movements in occupied countries, and gather intelligence that could change the course of the war. SOE was not just an ordinary intelligence agency, it operated undercover and used a wide range of methods, from blowing up strategic targets to organizing resistance among the local population. What set SOE apart from other intelligence agencies? First and foremost, it wasn't just military professionals who were involved. Ordinary people became part of SOE. Young women, students, factory workers, and even former athletes were recruited to become SOE agents, fighting the enemy under the most difficult and dangerous conditions. These people received special training, including sabotage techniques, encryption, and intelligence psychology. One of the main tasks of SOE was to destroy key infrastructure in enemy territory. Examples of these targets included bridges, railroads, and factories producing weapons. SOE agents were tasked not only with destroying these targets, but also with creating partisan movements that would continue to fight even after they withdrew. These operations helped weaken the economy of Nazi Germany and other occupied countries, paralyzing the military supply chain. The main idea behind SOE was not only destruction, but also creating chaos that forced the enemy to spend resources on recovery while simultaneously weakening their morale. These operations required incredible courage, as agents often operated in complete isolation without support or any certainty that their missions would succeed. The SOE story is not just about spies and saboteurs. These were real heroes who risked their lives for a great cause. One of the most notable examples is the operation in Norway, where SOE agents organized a sabotage team that destroyed vital German heavy water production plants, a critical component for nuclear weapons development. This became one of the most successful operations, with consequences that had significance even after the war ended. Among the most famous SOE operations is Operation Anthropoid, aimed at assassinating high-ranking Nazi leader Reinhard Heydrich, one of Hitler's most ruthless executioners. The operation involved two Czech agents, Jan Kubis and Josef Valkak, who were sent to Prague with the mission to eliminate Heydrich. Despite constant danger, they succeeded in their mission, delivering a powerful blow to Nazi Germany and becoming a symbol of the courage and determination of SOE. In addition, SOE played a crucial role in the creation and support of the French resistance. The support SOE agents provided to the French Maquis helped coordinate their efforts with Allied forces, reducing the effectiveness of German occupation forces. It's also important to note that women played a significant role in SOE. One of the most famous female agents was Vera Atkins, who was responsible for recruiting and training agents for operations in occupied Europe. Every SOE agent, from students to experienced soldiers, was trained not only for physical survival, but also for psychological resilience. They had to operate in complete isolation, without communication with the outside world, constantly risking their lives and facing deadly danger. Their missions often seemed impossible, but it was thanks to these brave people, fighting on the front lines of an invisible war, that the Nazi machine was weakened from within. Ultimately, SOE not only destroyed military targets, but also created a resistance network that, at critical moments, could take the initiative from the enemy, forcing them to waste valuable time and resources on recovery. These covert operations played an invaluable role in weakening the German army, while simultaneously boosting the morale of the Allies. Shocking secrets of World War II. The secret operations no one talks about. World War II was the largest conflict in human history, and many of the events that led to the defeat of the Third Reich and its allies remain in the shadows. But behind every major battle, behind every decision of life and death, there were secret operations that didn't always make it into history books. These operations were so secretive that even most high-ranking military leaders were unaware of them. They determined the fates of millions of people, changed the course of the war, yet their importance is often forgotten or ignored. How were wars fought in the shadows? What secret groups and organizations operated behind the scenes? Why was it so important for governments to keep these operations hidden from the public? The SOE, Special Operations Executive, was one of the most mysterious and influential missions of World War II. Trained at the best training facilities in the UK, SOE agents were sent into occupied Europe to conduct sabotage operations, destroy key infrastructure, and create resistance movements in occupied territories. Many of these agents were ordinary citizens, armed only with their faith in their country and their desire to change the course of history. But how did they operate? How were these secret operations made possible? Were there people who, under the threat of death, broke the laws of war to change them? Why did these heroes remain unknown for so long? The Manhattan Project, on the other hand, was a completely different game. It wasn't just espionage or sabotage, it was a war of science and technology. The United States and its allies believed that if they could develop an atomic bomb before Germany, victory would be ensured. Thousands of scientists, engineers, and physicists worked in strict secrecy to develop a weapon of mass destruction that would not only change the course of the war, but alter the entire history of humanity. But what lay behind the creation of the atomic bomb? What moral and ethical dilemmas did those working on this project face? This project became the foundation of what we now call the nuclear era. But during the war, in the deepest shadows, new types of weapons and new methods of destruction were being created. The Manhattan Project became a symbol of both progress and devastation. But aside from major operations like SOE and the Manhattan Project, there were many others. Operations that involved not only spies and saboteurs, but hundreds of thousands of ordinary people who became part of the invisible resistance army. From the French Maquis to Italian partisans, from covert operations in Africa to recruiting agents in countries under enemy control, these actions became decisive, often determining the outcome of battles before they even began. What happened in the shadows of the war? What operations and battles were hidden from the public eye but were key to victory? How many secret victims and heroic feats remain unseen? We will dive into those secrets that decided the fates of entire countries and peoples. But remember, what seemed unspeakable was often more important than all the open battles and wars. And behind every hidden action were people who made the impossible possible, to defeat the enemy without ever revealing themselves. SOE was not just a spy mission, it was the largest network of undercover agents operating under the radar, carrying out assignments that could affect the outcome of the war. In these secret operations were those who risked their lives not for recognition, but for freedom. Right in the heart of Nazi-occupied Europe, these heroes organized sabotage, helped partisans, destroyed military factories and railways, and gathered intelligence that saved lives. One of the most famous SOE agents, Victoria Hammond, was one of the first women to become a spy for Britain. She was part of an operation that became a symbol of invisible resistance in occupied countries. The sabotage carried out by these agents was not only physical but psychological, intimidating the enemy, creating chaos and confusion in their ranks, all of which led to significant victories in the war. But there were other, even more secretive operations that remained in the shadows, like Operation Sicily, where disinformation was used to make Germany mistakenly believe that the Allies planned to land not in Italy, but in Greece. This created an unexpected strike on southern Italy and relieved pressure on other fronts. Incredible as it may seem, even such a simple intervention could have played a decisive role. And when you add to that the undercover operations at sea and in the air, we begin to see how important these small, invisible steps were in shaping the overall picture of the war. The Manhattan Project, on the other hand, was the operation that led to the creation of nuclear weapons. The secrecy surrounding it was unprecedented. Thousands of scientists, engineers, and physicists, even while working in complete isolation, did not know their place in the vast machinery of the war. The Manhattan Project was built in the strictest secrecy. The scientists didn't even know that their colleagues working on other parts of the project were researching completely different aspects of the same goal, the creation of the atomic bomb. But the question that troubled every scientist was this: If this weapon is created, will it be the thing that breaks the World War, or will it lead to the destruction of humanity? These questions remained unanswered until the first successful test of the bomb in New Mexico in 1945, but not everyone was certain it would be used. The moral dilemma was heavy for those involved in the project. However, despite their concerns, the scientists and military leaders of the U.S. made the decision to use the atomic bomb against Japan. This decision led to the tragedy of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but it also ended the war with Japan and changed the world forever. Another covert operation, Operation Crossword, involved the interception and decryption of Japanese and German codes. The operation was so secret that even now, many decades later, some details of its successes remain classified. But it was thanks to operations like these that the Allies were able to predict every move the enemy made and even uncover their strategic plans. Whether these operations were large, like the Manhattan Project, or small, like the enemy codes, every element in this covert war played a crucial role. Agents, scientists, partisans, and code breakers, all of them were part of that invisible army that fought for victory, yet remained unseen by the public. When we think about World War II, we often imagine large battles, millions of casualties, army generals, and heroic feats. But what remained in the shadows, that's what truly determined the outcome of the war. And all of these secret operations, despite their secrecy, were far more significant than anyone could have imagined.
The Secret of the V-2, From Strikes on London to NASA. London, late 1944. A thunderous explosion erupts out of nowhere, shattering a quiet neighborhood. There was no air raid siren this time, no warning at all. In an instant, houses are reduced to rubble and flames. Panicked survivors look to the sky, confused. What kind of attack strikes without any hint? It wasn't dropped from a plane. It was something new and terrifying. The Nazi V-2 rocket. The V-2 was the world's first long-range ballistic missile, a 46-foot rocket. It shot into the upper atmosphere and then plunged down at over 3 times the speed of sound. By the time you heard its sonic boom or felt the blast, it was already too late. Each V-2 carried a 1-ton warhead, enough to obliterate a city block. For Londoners who had endured years of bombing, this weapon was a nightmare made real, a silent killer raining down from the stratosphere. Adolf Hitler hailed the V-2 as a Vergeltungswaffe, a vengeance weapon, a last-ditch reprisal for the Allies' bombardment of German cities. By 1944, with the Nazi war effort crumbling, Hitler was desperate for a Wunderwaffe, a wonder weapon to turn the tide. He had already tried the V-1 flying bomb, which the British nicknamed the Buzz Bomb. But the V-1 had an engine you could hear coming and could be shot down. The V-2 was his next gamble, a weapon that enemies couldn't stop or even see coming. Developed in absolute secrecy, it was meant to crush civilian morale and show off German technological might, even as the Reich was on the brink of defeat. The mastermind behind the V-2 was a brilliant German engineer, 32-year-old Werner von Braun. At a hidden research base in Peenemünde on the Baltic Sea, von Braun and his team had been working on rocket technology for the German army. In October 1942, they successfully launched a prototype that soared nearly into space. This success convinced Hitler to fund the project at full throttle. Soon, factories were churning out V-2s for deployment. That production came at a horrific human cost. After Allied bombers hit Peenemünde in 1943, the Nazis moved V-2 manufacturing underground to a facility called Mittelwerk. There, thousands of concentration camp prisoners were forced to assemble rockets in brutal conditions. Starved, beaten, and worked to death, more people died building the V-2 than were killed by it as a weapon. It was cutting-edge science built on an appalling foundation of human suffering. In September 1944, the V-2 campaign began. London was among the first targets. Residents were stunned by explosions that struck without warning. Initially, some thought gas mains had blown up because no enemy aircraft were heard. Within months, over 500 V-2s slammed into Greater London. One rocket obliterated a department store full of shoppers, killing 160 people in an instant. There was simply no time to seek shelter, no pattern to anticipate. Even Winston Churchill confessed that the constant fear caused by the V-2 was worse on morale than the Blitz had been. Day or night, clear skies or cloudy, an attack could come at any moment. By early 1945, roughly 9,000 people had been killed by V-2 strikes across Britain, Belgium, and elsewhere. The destruction was horrifying, yet in strictly military terms, the V-2's impact was not enough to alter the outcome of the war. It was a weapon of terror, inflicting fear and death, but it could not stop the Allied armies advancing on Germany. Because the V-2 was impossible to intercept, the Allies had to find other ways to counter it. British intelligence used deception to throw off the rocket's aim, feeding false reports to Germany about where V-2s were hitting, so the launch crews would adjust their targeting incorrectly. And as Allied troops pushed toward Germany, they quickly overran the V-2 launch sites. In March 1945, Allied forces seized the last active launch areas in the Netherlands, finally silencing the attacks. Hitler's much-hyped wonder weapon had failed to save him from defeat. With the war in Europe ending, the race was on to grab the V-2's secrets. The victorious powers realized this rocket technology would be crucial for the future. Allied teams scoured Germany for missiles, parts, and documents. In the wreckage of factories and laboratories, they found dismantled V-2s and stacks of blueprints. The Soviet Union and the Western Allies each wanted a share of this technological treasure and the brains that created it. The most valuable prize was Wernher von Braun and his engineering team. They willingly surrendered to American soldiers, preferring the Americans over the Soviets. The U.S. Army, recognizing their expertise, whisked von Braun and his men out of Europe before the Soviets could get to them. Under a secret plan codenamed Operation Paperclip, dozens of these German scientists were brought to the United States. It was a controversial move. These men had worked for Hitler's regime, but with the Cold War looming, America was eager to secure their knowledge for itself. Soon, captured V-2 rockets and their former German operators were hard at work on American soil. At the White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico, U.S. engineers, alongside von Braun's team, began test launching V-2s to understand their design. The same rockets that once terrorized London now carried scientific instruments high into the atmosphere. In fact, one such launch in 1946 even took the first ever photograph of Earth from the edge of space. Meanwhile, von Braun and his colleagues started developing new rockets for the U.S. Army, applying what they had learned to America's own missile program. Their expertise quickly paid off. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the world's first satellite, sparking an urgent space race. The United States answered by launching its own satellite, Explorer 1, in January 1958, using a rocket designed by von Braun's team. Later that year, the U.S. formed NASA, a new space agency, and von Braun and his German scientists were at its heart. In Huntsville, Alabama, they began work on the Saturn V, a gigantic rocket built on the principles of the V-2, but vastly more powerful. Less than 25 years after the V-2's first strike on London, its descendants carried humankind to the moon. In July 1969, a Saturn V rocket designed by Wernher von Braun's team launched Apollo 11 on its historic journey. It's a profound historical irony. The technology that once served war and destruction had been transformed into the vehicle that enabled humanity's greatest leap. The V-2 was the direct ancestor of the Saturn V. Step by step, the knowledge from Hitler's deadly weapon had helped America achieve a triumphant feat of exploration. The saga of the V-2 rocket is a remarkable tale of innovation and moral compromise. It began as a weapon of vengeance and terror, and ended by paving the way to space. But that transformation came with ethical trade-offs. The United States gained immensely from the V-2's technology and the talents of its creators. But it also meant forgiving the past of men who had built weapons for the Nazi war machine. This legacy leaves us with tough questions. Do the ends justify the means? Can great achievements be separated from the dark context in which they were born? So, what do you think about this journey? From the ruins of war to the heights of space, was bringing Nazi scientists like von Braun to America a necessary evil to propel the nation into the space age and win the Cold War? Or should the moral cost have given us pause? It's a complex chapter of history that still sparks debate. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Enigma, the code that changed the course of World War II. The Enigma machine, an unbreakable code. It's the dark early days of World War II. In the Atlantic, German U-boat submarines prowl beneath storm-tossed waves, hunting Allied ships with deadly success. Their advantage is a mysterious cipher machine called Enigma. This typewriter-sized device encrypts Nazi communications into a baffling jumble of letters. Commanders send orders to U-boats and Army units confident that Enigma's coded messages are indecipherable to the enemy. To the Germans, Enigma is a wonder of technology, a code they believe unbreakable, and it gives them a deadly edge. Enigma works through an ingenious system of rotating internal wheels, rotors, and an elaborate plug board, which together transform plain German text into secret code. Every time an operator presses a key, the machine's rotors shift, changing the electrical pathways and substituting one letter for another in a complex sequence. By war's outset, the German military has refined Enigma with 3 interchangeable rotors, later adding a 4th for extra security, and a plug board that swaps pairs of letters. The result is astronomical complexity, on the order of 150 trillion possible settings for each message. Without knowing the exact rotor arrangement and plugboard connections, settings that the Germans changed daily, the ciphertext seems gibberish. To Allied codebreakers, trying to guess the right combination by brute force would be like trying to find a single grain of sand on a vast beach. By all logic of the time, Enigma appears invulnerable. German operators are also drilled in strict procedures to avoid mistakes. They carry codebooks that tell them the day's key settings and even use special ink that dissolves in water to destroy secrets if capture threatens. As radios tap out encrypted orders in Morse code, Nazi officers have full faith that Enigma will keep their messages safe from prying eyes. This overconfidence leads the Germans to pour out their plans over the airwaves, coordinating U-boat wolfpack tactics, directing tank movements, and sending Hitler's commands, never dreaming the Allies could be listening in. But the Allies are about to prove them wrong. Codebreakers unite, the first cracks in Enigma. Long before the world knew names like Alan Turing or Bletchley Park, a small team of Polish mathematicians had already taken the first daring steps to unravel Enigma. In the early 1930s, Poland's Cipher Bureau obtained some Enigma blueprints and manuals, sourced through French intelligence from a German traitor, and set top mathematician Marian Rejewski to work. In 1932, Rejewski achieved the unimaginable. He deduced the internal wiring patterns of the Enigma's rotors, essentially reconstructing a working Enigma from nothing more than brain power and limited documents. This breakthrough allowed the Poles to read some German messages. Using a custom-built mechanical device they nicknamed the Bomba Kryptologiczna, or cryptologic bomb. It was an incredible achievement, but it was just the opening act of the Enigma drama. As the 1930s went on, the Germans kept increasing Enigma's security, adding more scrambling complexity, and changing operational procedures. By the late 1930s, Poland's small team was struggling to keep up with daily key changes and new features like the plug board that vastly increased the cipher's permutations. With war looming and understanding their own limits, the Polish codebreakers made a fateful decision. In July 1939, on the eve of the invasion of Poland, they shared their Enigma-breaking methods and machines with British and French intelligence in a secret meeting near Warsaw. They handed over everything, wiring diagrams, replica Enigma machines, and their hard-won knowledge, effectively passing the torch to Britain to continue the fight against Enigma. It was a transfer of both information and responsibility. If war came, the Allies would need to carry on the race to break the German code. Armed with the Polish findings, British intelligence set up a dedicated code-breaking operation at a sprawling Victorian estate in Buckinghamshire, Bletchley Park. There, a multinational group of mathematicians, engineers, puzzle solvers, and linguists assembled in utmost secrecy. The stage was set for one of the great secret battles of World War II, a battle of wits and machines fought not with bullets but with brains. At Bletchley, the previously impossible task, defeating Enigma, now seemed just a bit more attainable thanks to the groundwork laid by the Poles. But enormous challenges still lay ahead. The war had begun, Enigma traffic had exploded, and each intercepted message arrived as a tantalizing string of nonsense that might hide crucial information, if only it could be deciphered in time. The clock was ticking. Bletchley Park and Alan Turing's secret war. Bletchley Park became the nerve center of Allied cryptography. Huts and outbuildings on the estate were converted into makeshift offices where codebreakers labored in shifts around the clock. At the heart of this effort was a brilliant British mathematician, Alan Turing. Turing, along with colleagues like Gordon Welchman, Dilly Knox, and others, took the Polish concepts and pushed them to new heights. He envisioned an improved mechanical code-breaking device, an electromechanical machine that could rapidly sift through Enigma settings far faster than any human. The result was the British bomb, a humming, clacking apparatus filled with rotating drums that simulated multiple Enigma machines at once. Dozens of bommies were eventually built, and they ran day and night, testing countless rotor and plugboard combinations at high speed. How did the bombs work? Turing had figured out a clever way to narrow the possibilities. One key insight was that Enigma never encrypted a letter as itself. For example, an A in plain text would never come out as an A in the cipher. This quirk, along with probable guesses of German message content called cribs, gave the codebreakers a foothold. Each day, the team would try to guess a few likely phrases in the German messages, common weather report words, a frequent closing like Heil Hitler, or known military jargon, and then set the bomb to run through different Enigma configurations that would produce those patterns. Most attempts led nowhere, but if the machine found a configuration that yielded a sensible German phrase, they knew they had discovered that day's Enigma settings. Then, in a burst of triumph, all the day's intercepts could suddenly be read in plain German. Speed was essential. The codes reset every midnight with a new day's key, so if they didn't crack it in time, yesterday's intelligence might become useless for imminent operations. Life at Bletchley Park was intense and filled with pressure. Young women operators, many recruited from university math departments or even from fields as unlikely as music and linguistics, tended the whirring bombs and meticulously logged results. In adjacent huts, linguist experts translated the deciphered German messages and intelligence officers pondered their significance. Security was absolute. Few outside Bletchley knew what was happening there. In fact, so secret was the work that even many military units receiving intelligence didn't know it came from code breaking. The decrypted messages were distributed under the code name Ultra and often disguised as information from spies or reconnaissance to hide the true source. The people at Bletchley Park were in a unique position. They could peer directly into enemy communications, but they could never breathe a word about it to anyone beyond their closed ranks. By 1940, thanks to Bletchley's efforts, the Allies were regularly reading Luftwaffe, German Air Force, Enigma signals, and many Army communications. This proved invaluable during events like the Battle of Britain, where advance warning of German air raid plans gave the Royal Air Force a fighting chance. However, one arena remained especially challenging: the encrypted messages of the Kriegsmarine, the German Navy. Naval Enigma used more complex procedures and later additional rotors. It was the hardest nut to crack, and unfortunately, the one guarding the coordination of U-boat wolf packs ravaging the Atlantic. The Battle of the Atlantic hung in the balance, and cracking naval enigma became an Allied obsession. The Battle of the Atlantic turns. By 1941, the Battle of the Atlantic was at its peak fury. U-boats traveled in packs, attacking Allied convoys of merchant ships carrying vital supplies to Britain. Stealthy and lethal, the submarines communicated with German naval headquarters via Enigma encrypted radio, receiving orders on where to stalk their prey. Allied codebreakers at Bletchley Park knew that if they could read the U-boat Enigma messages in real time, they could direct convoy escorts and aircraft to avoid or ambush the wolf packs. It would be like suddenly turning on a light in a dark room full of predators. But first, they needed a break, some stroke of luck or ingenuity to get into the naval cipher. That break came through daring capture operations at sea. In May 1941, the Royal Navy scored a huge intelligence coup. During an intense convoy battle, the British destroyer HMS Bulldog forced German U-boat U-110 to surface and surrender. In the chaos, as U-110's crew abandoned ship, a Royal Navy boarding party rushed into the sinking sub and snatched up precious materials, an intact Enigma machine and codebooks listing the current settings. It was a jackpot. Suddenly, Bletchley Park had the cipher keys straight from the source. For the next few weeks, British intelligence could read the U-boat communications almost as easily as the Germans themselves. themselves. However, this advantage had to be guarded with extreme secrecy. Even the fact of U-110's capture was hidden. In fact, Winston Churchill did not even inform President Roosevelt of this Enigma haul until months later, so sensitive was the secret. The Germans, for their part, never realized U-110's Enigma was taken. They assumed the sub had sunk with all secrets safe. With the naval Enigma partially unlocked, Allied fortunes in the Atlantic improved. Convoys could be rerouted away from known U-boat patrol lines, and when unavoidable, warship escorts were vectored toward the submarines. Throughout late 1941, U-boat sinkings rose and Allied shipping losses fell as ultra-intelligence guided Allied responses. British codebreakers, now aided by their American counterparts after the U.S. entered the war, worked furiously to keep up as the Germans tweaked their systems. In February 1942, the Kriegsmarine introduced a new four-rotor Enigma M4 for Atlantic U-boats, temporarily blindsiding the codebreakers. Suddenly, many U-boat messages became unreadable again, a frightening setback that led to a surge in Allied losses during mid-1942. But the codebreakers did not give up. Through new captures, such as seized weather station codebooks and brave actions like the boarding of U-559 in late 1942, where 2 sailors died recovering Enigma documents from a sinking sub, and the development of faster high-speed bombs, including advanced machines built in Dayton, Ohio for the U.S. Navy, the Allies regained their reading of naval Enigma by the end of 1942. The Wolfpacks could no longer hide. Spring 1943 marked the turning point in the Atlantic War. With Enigma decrypts revealing U-boat positions and plans, Allied anti-submarine forces orchestrated devastating blows against the undersea hunters. New long-range patrol aircraft, improved radar, and ultra-intelligence all converged. In May 1943, later dubbed Black May by U-boat crews, the German submarine fleet suffered catastrophic losses. Allied forces sank dozens of U-boats that month, around 41 U-boats lost in May alone, far outpacing the rate of new U-boat deployment. Convoy after convoy passed through relatively unscathed as Wolfpack ambushes were foiled or met with fierce resistance. Facing unsustainable casualties, Admiral Karl Dönitz had no choice but to withdraw the majority of U-boats from the North Atlantic by late May 1943. The worst threat to Britain's lifeline was effectively defeated. While U-boats continued to operate in lower numbers and other areas until war's end, they never regained the lethal prowess they had before Ultra tipped the scales. As Churchill later admitted, the U-boat menace was the only thing that had truly frightened him during the war, and now that menace was tamed. The secret weapon that shortened the war. The cracking of Enigma was more than just a technical marvel. It became one of the decisive factors in the Allied victory. Intelligence from Enigma decrypts, codenamed Ultra, gave the Allies a priceless window into enemy strategy. It wasn't only U-boats. Enigma messages guided Allied commanders in countless engagements, from anticipating German moves in the North African desert, where Ultra intercepts helped British General Montgomery outfox Rommel's Afrika Korps, to countering Luftwaffe bombing plans, to hunting warships like the battleship Bismarck. By knowing what the enemy planned to do, almost as soon as they issued orders, the Allies could stay one step ahead. Many historians believe that the Ultra project, centered on Enigma decryption, shortened World War II by as much as 2 years. In a war that had already killed tens of millions, those 2 years saved were invaluable. Potentially millions of lives spared and a quicker liberation of occupied countries. Yet for all its impact, the Enigma secret remained just that, a closely guarded secret for decades. The men and women of Bletchley Park took their vow of silence seriously. Even after victory, they told no one of their role. The Allies were so keen to keep the Enigma breakthrough hidden that they never revealed to the Germans that their code had been broken. In fact, after the war, captured Enigma machines were quietly distributed to some other countries for diplomatic use. Those nations confidently used Enigma to protect their communications, unaware the Allies could still read them. It wasn't until the 1970s that the true story of Enigma and Ultra was declassified and became public knowledge. For over 30 years, the veterans of Bletchley Park kept mum, embodying embodying the very secrecy that had won the War of Codes. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill paid tribute to these unsung heroes in a fitting metaphor. They were the geese that laid the golden eggs but never cackled. Their golden eggs were the priceless intelligence decrypts, and they never cackled because their work remained silent and hidden. As we look back today, the Enigma saga reads almost like a spy thriller, a tale of genius and daring that changed history. It's the story of how nerdy mathematicians and quiet analysts helped bring down a war machine, how clacking electromechanical bombs outwitted U-boats and panzer divisions, and how one small team of codebreakers gave Allied commanders the insight they needed to win. The importance of cryptography in modern warfare was cemented by the Enigma struggle. Alan Turing and his colleagues not only cracked Enigma, but in doing so they pioneered computational techniques that paved the way for modern computers, truly changing the world in more ways than one. In the end, the German faith in Enigma proved fatally misplaced. The very messages the Nazis thought were secure wound up sealing their fate. Enigma was the code that the Allies broke, and by breaking it, they changed the course of World War II. The fall of Enigma stands as a triumph of human ingenuity and determination, a secret victory that helped ensure freedom prevailed over tyranny. It's a dramatic reminder that in war, information can be just as powerful as tanks or bombs, and that even the hardest problems can be solved under pressure by those who refuse to give up. Nuclear weapons, Little Boy and Fat Man, August 6, 1945. Morning, altitude 30,000 feet. A strange metallic cylinder drops from the belly of a B-29 named Enola Gay. It spins, accelerates, and falls, not just on a city, but into the pages of history. They called it Little Boy. It redefined war. It marked the beginning of an era where weapons no longer merely destroyed, they altered the course of civilization itself. To understand how Little Boy came to be and why it was followed by Fat Man, we must go back to one of the largest scientific undertakings in human history, the Manhattan Project. The birth of the atomic bomb. The U.S. launched its nuclear weapons program in 1939 after physicists Leo Szilard and Albert Einstein warned President Roosevelt of Nazi Germany's potential to build an atomic bomb. The concept was simple: release the energy stored inside atoms through a chain reaction. But the execution, colossally complex. The Manhattan Project mobilized over 130,000 people across 3 countries, costing more than $2 billion at the time, and it produced 2 completely different weapons. Little Boy, simplicity with a price. Little Boy was the first. It used a gun-type design where 2 subcritical masses of uranium-235 were slammed together to create a supercritical chain reaction. Technically, it was simple. The structure resembled a long artillery barrel. Uranium-235 was rare and difficult to produce. Nearly all U.S. uranium reserves were used for this single bomb. Specs: weight, approximately 9,000 pounds, 4,000 kilograms. Yield, approximately 15 kilotons of TNT, detonated 580 meters above Hiroshima, vaporizing the heart of the city and generating heat above 4,000 degrees Celsius. And yet, Little Boy was never tested before use. Why? There wasn't enough uranium to spare. Fat Man, complexity with power. Fat Man was more advanced, based on plutonium-239 and the implosion method. Instead of slamming material together, it compressed a plutonium core with symmetrical conventional explosions. Pros: plutonium was easier to mass produce, the design was more efficient and scalable. Cons: required exact synchronization. Milliseconds mattered. Testing was essential. That test happened on July 16, 1945, in the New Mexico desert. The Trinity explosion marked the dawn of the nuclear age. Its yield, approximately 21 kilotons, and the design was chosen for the second bomb used on Nagasaki. Why use both? The question remains debated to this day. Technically, Fat Man was superior, but Little Boy was ready first and offered the element of shock. Politically, the U.S. wanted to demonstrate 2 distinct technologies, signaling total nuclear capability to the USSR. 2 aircraft, 2 cities, 2 different technologies, one message to the world: the nuclear era had begun. August 6, 1945, 8:15 a.m., Hiroshima. Hiroshima. The silver shadow of a B-29 glides across the sky. Its mission, to deliver the first nuclear weapon used in combat. The world is about to change. Hiroshima, instant annihilation. Little Boy exploded 580 meters above the city. A fireball over 4,000 degrees Celsius incinerated everything in a 1.5-kilometer radius. Between 70,000 and 90,000 people died instantly. By the end of 1945, death toll estimates exceeded 140,000. People were vaporized, leaving shadows burned into stone. Hospitals collapsed. Fires raged. Radiation poisoned survivors. Nagasaki, the final blow. August 9, 1945. Target, Kokura, but heavy clouds forced a change, and the bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. Fat Man detonated 500 meters above ground, unleashing approximately 21 kilotons. Rough terrain and hills reduced the destruction radius, but still approximately 70,000 people perished. Though more powerful than Little Boy, the topography saved part of the city. Rare facts and myths. Kyoto was the original target, but U.S. officials removed it due to its cultural significance. Kokura became known as the city saved by clouds. Little Boy caused less fallout, but more deaths due to Hiroshima's flat geography and high population density. Japan's reaction. Initially, Japan refused to believe the U.S. had used atomic bombs. Only after both attacks and intercepted messages from the U.S. did the gravity of the situation set in. August 10th, Emperor Hirohito intervened for the first time, demanding surrender. August 15th, Japan announced unconditional capitulation. Ethics and consequences. Were the bombs necessary? Did they save lives or serve as a warning to the USSR? Could Japan have surrendered without them? The U.S. claimed, "We prevented a costly invasion and saved millions." Critics argue civilians were sacrificed in a strategic demonstration. Technological legacy. The implosion design became the foundation for Cold War arsenals. The USSR accelerated its nuclear program, detonating its first bomb in 1949. A new era began: nuclear deterrence and mutually assured destruction, MAD. Little Boy and Fat Man weren't just bombs, they were symbols of science, fear, and irreversible power. They didn't just end a war, they redrew the boundaries of warfare itself. But the question remains, was there another way? Or was the nuclear path humanity's unavoidable choice? Tell us what you think in the comments. Your voice matters, because history is not just about facts, but about how we understand them. Strike on New York. What if Germany had succeeded? Europe is burning. Germany is losing ground on the Eastern Front. The Allies are pushing toward the Rhine, but in the shadows, an idea is born, one that could have changed everything. A secret project known as a 9/A10. In Nazi circles, they called it the America rocket. It wasn't fiction. It was a real plan. A two-stage missile capable of reaching the east coast of the United States. Its target, New York City, 5,000 kilometers. The first stage, a massive A-10 booster. The second, a modified V-2 rocket. The launch? Possibly from occupied France or Norway? So the question is, what if Germany had made it in time? What if, in early 1945, they managed just one successful launch? What if a Nazi missile had actually hit New York City? To understand the impact, V-2 carried a 1-ton warhead. The A9/A10 could deliver nearly 3 times as much. A strike on Manhattan, and the heart of America's economic and political power, would become a firestorm. Panic, shock, mobilization. America, once untouchable, suddenly hit at home. This would have been September 11th in 1945. And this wasn't just a theoretical launch. One version of the A9 was designed to be piloted. Yes, with a man inside the rocket. A pilot guiding the final descent, who would die on impact. The world's first strategic suicide mission, 20 years before the Japanese kamikaze. At the time, U.S. intelligence had no clear warning of such a threat. No missile defense, no early detection. The impact would have come without a sound. How would America respond? Not with airstrikes, not with fleets, with the atomic bomb. By March 1945, the Manhattan Project was nearly complete. The bomb was ready, the Trinity test only weeks away. A missile strike on New York would have triggered an immediate nuclear response, not against Japan, but against Germany. Berlin, Hamburg, Munich. Any one of them, ground zero, the first city in human history, erased by a nuclear weapon. And the press, Congress, the American people, they'd demand justice, retribution, total war. The panic might have made Pearl Harbor look small. A new word would have entered our language, megadeath, spoken in the context of Manhattan. But that's only the beginning. Could Germany really pull it off? Was it even possible? That's what we'll uncover in Part 2. Because nothing about this plan was simple. Not the fuel, not the guidance, not the launch. So, could Nazi Germany really have done it? Not on paper, not in theory, but for real. In 1945? Technically, there was a chance, but a slim one. The A9/A10 program was still in its early prototype stage. Its main research site, Peenemünde, had already been bombed. Factories were being moved underground. Fuel was scarce, and most of all, time was running out. Even the V-2 was unreliable. Roughly 1 out of every 4 launches failed. Navigation, crude, ballistic, and imprecise. No targeting, just guesswork. The whole idea wasn't about accuracy, it was about fear. A 9/A10 required special propellants, dual-stage engines, massive launch towers, and it all had to be done while Germany was collapsing. But what if Hitler gave the green light? What if Werner von Braun had been given full control? What if every last drop of steel, fuel, and manpower was funneled into one single launch? It might have worked. One shot, one rocket, one strike on New York. And because guidance was so poor, the Nazis even considered sending a pilot, a man inside the rocket, to steer it, to sacrifice himself, to make sure it hit the target, the first intercontinental suicide weapon, years before kamikaze ever reached American ships. And if that had happened, America wouldn't have waited, not 1 second. They wouldn't bomb Tokyo. They'd bomb Germany. And not with firebombs, not with tanks, with nuclear fire. The most likely target, Hamburg, a port city, a manufacturing hub, densely populated. American planners already had it on their list as a potential atomic target. One bomb, 100,000 dead in a single flash. The Cold War wouldn't start in Berlin. It might not start at all. Because if the US dropped the bomb on Germany, Stalin might never have marched west. There'd be no East Germany, no wall, no Iron Curtain. And it all could have started with one Nazi missile, a desperate shot across the Atlantic. But why did they even consider it? Not for victory, not for strategy, but for symbolism, a way to say, we can reach you. The missile wasn't meant to win, it was meant to terrify, to leave a scar on history, even in defeat. And so we ask, if that rocket had flown, would the world today be the same, or did we miss a far darker version of history? By inches.